To the left-hand side for Vieira, who'll play it through to Gabriel Jesus, who's in here for Arsenal. Gabriel Jesus to finish it off. Oh, what a way to do it! Gabriel Jesus seals the points for Arsenal. He's back, and he's back with a bang. Into the penalty area it goes. Gabriel's header, and it's into the back of the net. Arsenal take an early lead through Gabriel.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner, the daily Arsenal podcast with me, Harry Symeou.
Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to the Chronicles of a Gooner, the Arsenal podcast with me, your host, Harry Symeou. Another jam-packed episode coming your way. We've got lots and lots and lots to talk about. We're going to discuss Eddie Nketiah's collapsed move to Marseille. That is no longer happening. Marseille have turned their attentions elsewhere. And so for the time being, Eddie Nketiah remains an Arsenal player. I'm going to share some thoughts with you on that because there's been quite a bit of discussion around whether or not Arsenal were right to dig their heels in. Whether or not Arsenal were right to say, nope, this is our price. And if you don't get to that point, then there is no deal, which ultimately led to Marseille turning their attention elsewhere and signing El Yawahi, who I think is a really good player, by the way. I can understand why they were interested in him. We're also going to touch on the news that Manchester City's hearing for the alleged 115 financial breaches is finally set to begin next month. We'll tell you as well when a verdict is expected. We're also going to chat Mikel Merino, even though I'm bored to death of it, because I just, like, if we really wanted this guy, wouldn't we have done it by now? Wouldn't we have progressed things? And we haven't, by the looks of it, as far as we're aware anyway. So we'll get into that. And we're also going to talk about Ajax's approach for Aaron Ramsdale and whether or not Arsenal should be open to letting Aaron Ramsdale leave the club on loan this month. There's loads and loads and loads to get into, as always. But if I could just quickly ask you, before we dive into the content, if you haven't done so already, please do leave a like if you're watching us on X. If you're watching us on YouTube, leave us a like, subscribe to the channel if you're brand new as well. And if you're listening on any of the audio platforms, whether that be Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or the likes, then make sure that you are subscribed and have left us a review because that really, really does help as well. Okay, let's dive into our first story. I do want to start off with the Eddie Nketiah stuff because I feel like that's something I've got quite a strong opinion on. And I know that from watching, for example, Tom Canton's The Gooner Talk this morning on playback, he disagrees with me. We look at this, I think, in very different ways. I would have loved to have jumped onto his phone in this morning if I was awake at that time, but I wasn't, to be honest with you. But let's get into that Eddie Nketiah stuff right after this. Really, it's not really a break, is it? But we'll do it. It's just to divide the chapters of the show. It makes it much easier for me when we come back after. Here's that little sting. Okay, let's talk Eddie Nketiah then. So yesterday at around about 4:30 p.m., we were informed that the deal or the potential deal between Olympique Marseille and Arsenal for Eddie Nketiah was off. Fabrizio Romano said that Olympique Marseille have informed Arsenal that Eddie Nketiah can be, or the Eddie Nketiah deal can be considered 100% collapsed. Olympique Marseille did not want to accept the 30 million euro package after having bids rejected. Despite getting the green light from the player, the deal is off. And there's been mixed reaction to this, I would say. There's a lot of Arsenal fans out there that are saying, good, we've been really bad sellers for a number of years. And so we're right to dig our heels in. We're right to stick to our valuation. He's a Premier League striker. He's someone that I think has done okay when he's come in and had to fill the boots of some of our more talented players. We've seen all of that sort of talked about in the past. He's done all right. Okay. He's, for me, someone that I think would walk into one of the Premier League teams in the kind of middle of the road. And I thought that Marseille felt like a really good place for him and a really good spot for him because it's a massive, massive football club in one of Europe's top 5 leagues. And to be able to turn out week after week with that support behind you, And obviously having had the experience of being a part of a big club previously, it felt to me like Eddie Nketiah was ready to play for a club like Marseille. And I'll be honest with you, I would rather play for Marseille than Bournemouth or Brentford. So I can completely understand why Eddie Nketiah was open to this deal. So what's actually happened? Arsenal have gone back to Marseille after a couple of bids and said, as far as we're aware, guys, 30 million euro package, that's what we want. If you meet that, then we're fine to let him join you initially on loan, as long as that obligation to buy for that 30 million euro package is in place. A deal can be done. Now, I've heard loads of people say, well, we don't know what the package looked like. Exactly. We don't know what the package looked like, right? So if you don't know what the package looks like, how can you say that the 2, 3, maybe even £4 million difference that we're talking about here between what Marseille's last bid was, as far as we're aware, and what Arsenal were looking for is going to make the world of difference to the structure of the deal? If you don't know the details of the structure of the deal, how can you say that? That's been my frustration with some of the kind of reaction to this. I know Tom said something along those lines, and I disagree with him. If you don't know exactly how that 30 million euros was going to be made up, then how can you say that it's because of the structure that Arsenal couldn't possibly accept 26, 27, whatever it was, million euros that Marseille were putting on the table? I guess the way I look at it is quite simple. And I put a post out about this a little bit earlier on, and I'm going to read it back to you, because I don't know that I'll be able to kind of put it across as eloquently if I was to try and do it again off the cuff. But this is what I said. I said, based on what we've been reading, Marseille's offer for Nketiah wasn't a million miles away from what Arsenal were looking for. We clearly weren't willing to budge on that 30 million euro proposal, but personally, I'd have done the deal at that price because Nketiah deserves to play. And as a club, given his role in the squad, we're at the stage, in my opinion, where the right thing is to sell. As far as we're aware, nobody else has made an offer. And so the 25 million euro plus offer that Marseille made is better than another season of Nketiah being on the fringes, his value decreasing further, and what we stand to get in January or next summer. If a Premier League club come in, and we know that Bournemouth are linked at the moment, and offer more, Arsenal would have done the right thing in sticking to their guns. But if that doesn't happen, how can you argue that we were right to dig our heels in over a few million? A player, as I always say to you guys, is only worth what someone is willing to pay. And at the moment, again, as far as we're aware, that's the biggest offer we've had. We'll only know if this was the right decision come the end of the window, but I can totally understand the frustrations of many on this. By all accounts, Eddie was ready to sign for Marseille. How must he be feeling? So if Bournemouth come in and say, bang, there's the money that you're looking for Eddie Nketiah, and Eddie Nketiah wants that move, agrees to that move, and that deal moves forward and happens, and Eddie Nketiah joins another club for more money than we stood to get from Marseille, I will hold my hands up and I will say, Arsenal, well done, fair play, you held your nerve, you stuck to your guns, and you got more for Eddie Nketiah. If that doesn't happen, at the end of the window, I'm going to be sitting here saying, we messed up with Eddie Nketiah. Okay, because I've said this before. Yes, okay, it's about the club's needs first and foremost. Okay, that's what Edu has to take care of. That's what Arteta has to take care of. That's what the hierarchy's priority is. No doubt about that whatsoever. But I've said it before, like, for all the stick that Eddie Nketiah gets, he's actually been a really good servant to the club. And I know people turn around and they say, well, he was getting 100K a week as far as we were aware, and he wasn't doing a great deal. And he got to wear the number 14 shirt and all of that nonsense, right? We constantly hear that. Well, he should be grateful. He should be thankful for the opportunity that he had. Actually, we convinced him to sign a new contract, I'd imagine, based on the premise that he'd have a bigger role in the squad. And as time has gone on and Arsenal have evolved and developed, and Kai Havertz has come in, and Kai Havertz has taken on that centre-forward role, relegating Gabriel Jesus perhaps down to number 2, therefore relegating Eddie down to number 3, the situation and the circumstances have changed. Now, I worked out at the time that we announced that Eddie Nketiah contract, the 5-year deal, that in total, if he stayed for the 5 years, that was going to cost us around about 23 to 25 million pounds. Okay. We're 2-3 years into that contract. So, as long as we get 25 million, we've covered our costs for the 5 years. And if you sell him with 2 years to go, actually, you've saved 2 years worth of money at the end of that contract. So basically, you've made profit. And we know that profit on a sale of someone like Eddie Nketiah, who is of that homegrown profile, goes straight on the books. And we're up, basically. Okay, that's how I see it. But you also have to look at the player as well. Okay, you convinced him to stay at the football club based on a promise that you could not live up to, or you'd failed to live up to, because he didn't get the game time that I'm sure was discussed. He didn't get the opportunity last season, especially in the second half of the campaign, to be our second choice striker. He ended up getting relegated down to third place, and he barely played, if we're being honest. It looks like that's going to be the case this season. You've got to look sensibly at this. You've got to look at it and think, what use is Eddie Nketiah to me this season, given his role in the squad? And is that option worth more than what Marseille's offer was? And the answer is no. And as I say, if Arsenal get a bigger offer, if Arsenal do the deal between now and the end of the window, and Eddie Nketiah gets his move so that he can go and continue his career, because for me, that's a big part of this as well, okay? He's one of our own, young lad, came through the ranks, I think has been a good servant to the football club. He deserves to get the opportunity to go out and play and do his thing and progress his career. Holding him back for 2 or 3 million when you haven't got a better offer on the table as it stands doesn't make sense to me. As I say, if Bournemouth come in and cough up the money, fine. I will apologize and I will say I was wrong in questioning Arsenal's management of this situation. But based on what I know today, I think we made a mistake not accepting the money from Olympique Marseille. And I'm happy to be proven wrong. I hope I'm proven wrong for Arsenal's sake, for Eddie Nketiah's sake. But I just think we've taken a real big risk and gamble with a couple of weeks remaining of the window here by completely shutting this stuff down, putting Marseille in a position where they've turned their attentions to El Yawahi instead. And now we don't have a suitor for Eddie Nketiah. Bournemouth are rumored to be interested, but we haven't heard of an offer or a bid coming in at this moment in time. Let's see what you guys are saying in the live chat. John Daly's pretty confident that Eddie will go for at least 30 million. I'm not so sure. Luke says, I don't think another club will offer what Marseille have bid. I already thought that their offer was fair. So did I. Boston says, the funny thing is Marseille paid in full for Wahi, but only wanted a loan option for Eddie. Something doesn't add up. Well, perhaps they see El Yawahi as a better option. I would argue that El Yawahi is a better option. We saw him a couple of times, didn't we, when we played Lens in the Champions League last season, and particularly in the away game, I was really, really impressed by him. What else have we got in the chat? Wolves FI is in the chat. Wolves fan says, Arsenal offered Wolves 50k for Daniel Bentley. Maybe Wolves should try and offer 1.5 million to Arsenal for Eddie Nketiah. You won't get him for that. Let's see. Steve Stone says, Harry, you pay your money, you take your choice. You are even saying that yourself. Let's wait and see. There's no drama either way, in my opinion. Look, I'm not angry about it. I'm not upset about it. To me, I can't make sense of it in my head. If there were a queue of clubs waiting to sign Eddie Nketiah and you wanted to try and play them off of each other, I would completely understand that approach. In fact, I would back that approach. But as it stands, we do not know of another offer for Eddie Nketiah. Perhaps there's one forthcoming from Bournemouth, but it hasn't come yet to our knowledge, to our understanding. So I just think that we're playing a dangerous game here. And I also really, really, and I guess this is what my frustration is driven by probably more than anything else. I really, really feel for Eddie Nketiah, who had given Marseille the green light. And he might feel now that we've done him out of a move that he was really excited about. Because as I said already, I would rather play for Marseille than Bournemouth or Brentford, the two clubs that are being talked about. So he might feel like he's been done out of a move. And I don't want one of our own players who's come through the ranks to feel that way, especially when it could have all been avoided for a few million quid. Jean Rene says, come on, Harry, you don't know what was promised to Eddie. We know Arteta loves him and he loves the club despite what fans think. What makes you so sure Eddie really wanted the move? Well, if he didn't want the move, he wouldn't have given Marseille the green light, number one, which is being reported by pretty much everybody that's covered this story. And on the point of I don't know what was promised. Yeah, of course, I don't know word for word what was promised, but I highly doubt that Eddie Nketiah was told, sign a new deal, a 5-year deal, purely so that we can make money on you down the line. Because even though you're the second choice striker now, when I get Kai Havertz or my next attacking recruit, I'm actually going to relegate you down to third place in the pecking order. And therefore, your position is going to be even weaker. Like, I don't for a second think that Arsenal warned Eddie Nketiah of their intention to go get another attacker and to have him potentially fall down the pecking order. So I'm not saying that they promised him he was going to play every single game, but he certainly wouldn't have known what was coming, because if he did, I don't think he would have signed that 5-year deal. Eddie Nketiah was in a position, right, where he was out of contract. So Eddie Nketiah could have joined a Bournemouth, a Brentford, a middle-of-the-road Premier League club and demanded a really big signing on fee that would have gone straight into his pockets and not into Arsenal's pockets. So, he could have been in a much stronger position. I know people say, well, he got that deal 5 years, security, 100K a week. I get that. But he could have made 10 million in a signing on fee. He could have made even 5 million, 6 million, 7 million, 8 million in a signing on fee, because as a free transfer, you hold all the power. Often we see players available on a free demand bigger salaries as well, because they're in that great, really strong bargaining position. So, yeah. Nikhil, thank you so much for your kind donation to the channel. I really, really do appreciate it, mate. Thank you so much. He says, all this transfer drama, Arsenal's transfer window every season is like getting the popcorn out. What say you, my man, Harry? Big up the podcast, bro. Thank you so much, mate. Really, really do appreciate it. Thank you for your support. Okay, that's enough Eddie Nketiah chat. My opinion on that is clear. I didn't intend to do 17 minutes on it, but we have. I just think that Arsenal are playing a bit of a dangerous game here, because if they don't get an offer north of what Marseille were offering, then they're going to look a little bit silly. Because there's all this talk of them sticking to their guns, but they might have to compromise as the window comes towards its close anyway, in which case, why didn't you let him go to the club that I think he probably would have preferred to join over the likes of Bournemouth, for example? But hey, that's just my opinion. On to the next story we go. Martin Ziegler reported yesterday that the hearing into Manchester City's 115 alleged financial breaches is set to start next month. Finally. Now, I don't know that they're guilty, and I know that a lot of Arsenal fans would prefer that they're found guilty, and the sort of punishments that are being talked about as sort of potentially coming their way would be so severe that it would open the door for Arsenal to really take a hold of the top spot in the Premier League and make it their own for the next few years. I get why, if you're looking at this purely through red and white tinted glasses, you want them to get found guilty. Okay. Honestly, I just want this thing to be resolved. And that to me is more important than what the outcome is. If they're not guilty, if they manage to wriggle their way out of it, fine. I just think that this is something that really does need to be addressed and dealt with, because it's gone on for far too long. And it's a dark cloud hanging over not just Manchester City, but over the Premier League as well. Because as long as they keep going on and winning titles, people are going to keep looking at them and questioning how they got to this point. And, if you're a Man City fan, that must be horrible. If you're someone who works at Manchester City, who's put blood, sweat and tears into the project and has worked tirelessly to make the football operation as successful as it is, then you're going to hate that as well. The fact that people are questioning the integrity of your football club. Either way, this needs to be dealt with. And we're hearing that we should get a verdict early. Well, we heard yesterday in the initial report in the Times that we should get a verdict early 2025. James Ollie has said today that the aim is for a final verdict, including any appeal, which you can be sure is coming if Manchester City don't get the outcome that they want. That the aim is to have that final verdict, including that appeal process, by the end of the 24-25 season. Still a long way away, still feels too far away for me, but at least we have some kind of guide date in terms of when this is going to get sorted and when we're going to know what the outcome of this is. But it really does need to be sorted ASAP. Fed up of talking about Mikel Merino, but we're going to do it again anyway, because we've read a post from Mikel Merino, who is a Spanish journalist who's been quite vocal on this whole Mikel Merino situation from the very, very beginning. And what he has posted, which was a little bit earlier on this morning at 6:34 a.m. UK time, so a good 4 or 5 hours ago now, was, and I've had to translate this on Google Translate, so it doesn't quite make perfect sense. You know, sometimes the translations aren't perfect, but he says, according to Diario Vasco, Arsenal haven't reached the 35 million euro point that Atletico Madrid have offered for Mikel Merino. That is to say, there have already been contacts with Real. I don't get that bit. Unlike Zubimendi, though, Merino has asked to leave and only has 1 year left on his contract. 35 million euros is a gift. So let me break that down. At least let me try and make sense of it in the way that I made sense of it. So first of all, I didn't know that Atletico Madrid were even in the equation here. And I'd question where the hell they're getting all this money from this summer. But anyway, 35 million euros is what Real Sociedad are said to be looking for. Atletico Madrid have said to have made a verbal offer to that amount. There's a mention of Real Madrid in there as well, which I don't really understand. Are they in the mix as well? We heard Barcelona being in contention. We heard of some other clubs. I don't know if Real Madrid are in the mix as well. But unlike Zubimendi, who, of course, rejected Liverpool yesterday, and it's kind of funny because speaking to some sort of like Liverpool supporting friends that I have, when it looked like Zubimendi was Anfield bound, and obviously there were those stories a little while ago that Arsenal had sort of approached him, but actually he was adamant that he wanted to stay at Real Sociedad. They were saying, well, our pool's bigger than yours and all the rest of it. And in the end, Zubimendi's done exactly what he's rumored to have done to Arsenal and to Bayern Munich in the past, and decided that actually he prefers to stay at La Real, the club of his heart. Mikel Merino adds that 35 million euros for Mikel Merino, in his opinion, is a gift. Basically, what he's saying is that that's really, really good value. I've got to be honest, I'm bored of this now. I just sit there sometimes and I think, if Arsenal really wanted to do this deal, they would have done it by now. We've seen them act quickly, decisively, when it comes to players that they really, really want. Mikel Merino's been rumored for a while, but we've never really had that much in terms of confirmation around how far down the line this thing might be. Fabrizio Romano's consistently brought it up and said that talks are ongoing. We've not had David Ornstein say that Arsenal have made an official bid. We've not had anything to say that Arsenal have made one and had it knocked back by La Real. So are Arsenal trying to convince the player first and foremost and then going to go in and make that offer? We just don't know. The truth is, I'm so over this now. I think we need a midfielder and I think we need an attacker. I'm not at the point yet where I'm angry about this window, but I am at the point where I'm starting to get a little bit agitated. There's 2 weeks left. I've got enough faith in the way that the club's being run at the moment that we will do what we need to between now and the end of the window. But the fact that the season kicks off in a few days' time, and unlike the last few years where we've had everybody in the door and ready to go, we don't seem to be in that position this time. Different summer, difficult summer because of the international tournaments. I accept all of that. But yeah, the Mikel Merino thing is starting to annoy me a little bit. Like, if you want him, go out and pay what they want. Real Sociedad know that he wants to leave. They know that he is looking for a move elsewhere. His contract situation isn't the same as ours with Eddie. So they know that, if they don't cash in this summer, they stand to lose a hell of a lot of money. So they're in a really weak position. Push. If this is what you want, Arsenal, push. Get it done. But it doesn't feel like that's happening at the moment. 。 have a quick look at the live chat because lots of you are commenting on the subjects that we're discussing today. The chat box is popping off. Let's see. Tom says, as we're dilly-dallying on the Merino case, who would you say could be our alternative midfield target? Who would you want it to be? It's really tough, mate, because I've tried really, really hard this season not to go into a summer saying, I want him, or I want him, or I want him. What I've tried to do is stay calm, stay grounded. I've looked at our team. I think it's a really strong squad with a lot going for it. But there is work that probably needs to be done. I've kind of tended to follow the players that the reports have been suggesting, just because, you know, one of the things I've done previously in summers is go, I want X, and then, you know, that's been based on purely my preference. And actually, we've gone nowhere near those players. And I've spent an awful lot of time thinking about, making content about, and discussing players that we were never even interested in. This time around, I've not really thought about it too much. I have to be honest. I've looked at the players that we've been linked with, and I've tried to come up with solutions in my mind based on the ones that are being talked about. And Mikel Merino is one of the few that we've been credibly linked to, but obviously that's not happened yet. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I couldn't tell you. I honestly couldn't tell you. I need to think about that. Ray Beam says this transfer saga is like an old 80s soap opera. You can literally miss multiple episodes and still be at the same place. Absolutely. Alistair Ben says, even if we don't sign anyone else, I'm not worried about the season at all. We're still going to be very competitive. Oh, for sure. Look, we're going to be competitive. There's no doubt about that. But what I really don't want, Alistair, is to have that regret come the end of the season and to look back on a campaign where, again, we went close, but maybe failed to get over the line and go, if only we did that, if only we did this. Like, I can't say I feel completely comfortable that with this group, we're going to be able to topple Manchester City. I think that if we improve internally, then that can make the difference. And I've said that, you know, we've almost been so obsessed with transfers over the last, you know, however many years that we almost forget about the part where you can actually improve your players and your coaching and your setup and your organization and all of those things. So I totally agree with you that we'd still be competitive, but I feel like we still need a couple of players for me to be saying this is our year. You know, that's how I feel about it right now. Paul James makes a really good point. This is a really, really good point. He says Sociedad probably thought that they'd lose their midfield, so they slowed down the Zubimendi and Merino sales. Merino can go now. There's no more reason to stall. So what Paul is suggesting is that with Zubimendi linked with Liverpool and Real Sociedad having to kind of wait for his decision and to find out whether or not he was going to take that move, accept that move, there might have been a reluctance on their part to let Mikel Merino go until that was resolved. With Zubimendi informing Liverpool yesterday, as far as we understand it, that he has no intention of joining them and that he will remain at La Real, perhaps now that opens the door to the Mikel Merino transfer. What else have we got? Yasin says, I agree with you, getting a bit annoyed with the Merino deal. Just get the deal done and move on to the forwards. Personally, I think they won't add any forwards this window, which would be a mistake. What else have we got? Gibby Box says, what if we send Patino to Sociedad? I don't think that's going to do it, to be honest with you. Okay, let's move on to our final and our main story of the day. This has gone on way longer than I planned, but hey, good conversation. Thanks for being interactive in the chat as well. It really, really does help when you're doing a solo pod. If you haven't done so already, could I please ask that you leave a like on the video? It helps me so much. It helps us with the old algorithm and all of that. Leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel as well if you're new. That really helps too. I can see that we've only got 80 likes on the board on the YouTube video, which is nowhere near good enough. I want to set a 500 like target for today's episode, so please support me in that. Right, let's move on to the next one then. We're going to talk Aaron Ramsdale. Big development with regards to his future this morning. Okay, David Ornstein reported bright and early this morning. As I was waking up, as I was yawning, I had to go and wash my face and double check that I was reading this right because it came so early in the morning. 7:46 a.m. He dropped this. Arsenal have rejected an approach from Ajax to sign Aaron Ramsdale. The initial loan offer was turned down. Arsenal would rather the 26-year-old England international leaves permanently this summer, but Ajax retain interest and optimism. Espanyol goalkeeper Joan Garcia could be the potential replacement. Okay, so where am I on this? I think I've accepted for a long time that Aaron Ramsdale probably wants to leave Arsenal Football Club. Okay, he is an outstanding goalkeeper, isn't quite as good a fit as David Raya based on what Mikel Arteta wants. He lost his place as a result. Raya's come in. Arsenal had the best defensive record in the Premier League last season by quite some way, looked really, really assured. And so it's one of those where at the beginning that there was a lot of noise around this and how could you do this to Aaron and how could you leave him out? But over time, I think people have recognized why Mikel made that decision. And based on the results that we've seen following that call, you can't really argue with it, right? It's the right thing. But it's sad because Aaron Ramsdale's a top goalkeeper and it feels like we're in a place now where, a bit like Eddie Nketiah, he probably has to move on. Ajax, would I be in a rush to go to Ajax if I was Aaron Ramsdale? Probably not, to be honest with you. I don't think that the Dutch Eredivisie is at the same level as the French league, for example. So to be the striker, the main man at Marseille is much more appealing if we're comparing Eddie's case to Ramsdale's, then I think going over to the Netherlands and being Ajax's goalkeeper, huge club, get all of that, steeped in history, etc., etc. But I think Aaron Ramsdale can do better than that. I really, really do. Ajax have come in and made a loan offer. There were discussions, there were conversations a few weeks ago, and I think we discussed it on this pod, around the idea of letting Aaron Ramsdale go out on loan, and that actually, well, if he's going to barely play anyway, then maybe you should let him go out on loan, play, show everybody what he can do again. And then potentially next summer, you're in a place where Aaron Ramsdale's value has increased. Because I've said it many, many times over the course of the summer, Arsenal's valuation of Ramsdale is fanciful. There were talks that Arsenal wanted 50 million quid for him. And unfortunately, when a goalkeeper's barely played, I think he made 6 appearances in total last season for Arsenal or something along those lines. When you take that into consideration, you got to accept that his value's been damaged by that. So how do you build it back up? Maybe you send him out on loan and you let him play football regularly. That's not going to happen at Arsenal, clearly, barring a problem for David Raya. But also you have to think about the club here, okay? You have to think about the club. And I want Ramsdale to be happy, just like I want Nketiah to be happy, just like I want him to get his move. But with Eddie Nketiah, it's different because selling him or letting him go out on loan initially with that obligation to buy coming later down the line, I don't believe that weakens our squad as much as letting Aaron Ramsdale go on loan would weaken our squad. And therefore, I'm far less open to a loan move for Ramsdale than I was for Eddie Nketiah. First of all, with the Nketiah offer from Marseille, we were going to get the money just a little bit later down the line, but it was still guaranteed and it was still fine. With this, there's no guarantee it goes well. There's that old saying, out of sight, out of mind. And the only way you're going to get top dollar for Aaron Ramsdale is if you sell him to a Premier League club. And if he goes and plays abroad, does that damage his prospects of getting a Premier League move? What I'm saying is that if he's going to go out on loan, I'd rather it was to a Premier League club than to Ajax. You know, I know that doesn't mean that no one will sign him in the future if he goes and plays for Ajax, but I just think out of sight, out of mind, that is a thing in football. And the only way you're going to get top dollar for Ramsdale is if you sell him to a Premier League club. So I'd rather that he stays here. To let him go weakens us in that goalkeeping department significantly. And I'm talking big time. Okay, we've signed young Tommy Setford. Carl Heinz gone out on loan to Real Valladolid. Not that I thought he was ready. But then beyond David Raya, if Ramsdale was to go, we're really, really weak. And there's talk of Espanyol's Joan Garcia being the potential replacement. Can I hand on my heart say that I know that he's good enough to be Arsenal's number 2? That I am confident in him if Raya was to pick up an injury, that he could be our goalkeeper for a run of games and it wouldn't significantly damage us. No, I can't. No, I can't, because I don't know a lot about him, number one. But number two, is he of the level that Ramsdale is at in terms of experience, in terms of, his standing within the club? Well, Garcia's standing at the club could never be like Aaron Ramsdale's if he was to arrive now, because he'd be coming from abroad. He wouldn't be the same character that Aaron Ramsdale is. He hasn't been at the club for a while to know the ins and outs, to understand Arteta's wants and needs as a manager, what he demands from his goalkeeper, etc., etc. So I just sell Aaron Ramsdale and get the money in, and then go and buy Joan Garcia, or bring in someone that you think is good enough to be the number 2, fine. But to let him go out on a straight up loan deal and not financially benefit from it, but also be weaker in that goalkeeping department, that just seems crazy to me. It doesn't make a lot of sense. There is the player element here. It's a bit like when I was talking about Eddie Nketiah. Sometimes you have to think about the player, and you have to, give them what they need as well. And players talk. If you manage players well, if you are respectful to players, if you treat them right, then you will end up in a situation where that word gets around. And when you go into the market looking at prospective targets, that those things do come into the equation, I think. But yeah, Joan Garcia doesn't inspire me, number one, and that's not to be disrespectful to him or critical of him, because I don't know enough about him. But can I sit here today and say Joan Garcia coming in as the number 2, Aaron Ramsdale going out on loan, that makes us stronger than we were at the beginning of the window? No, it doesn't. It makes us weaker. And I don't want us to be weaker. I want us to be better. I want us to be stronger. That's ultimately all we want, right? As Arsenal fans. I know it sounds like I'm ranting a lot on today's episode. I'm very conscious of that. But as I say, not at the point where I'm angry or calling for someone's head to roll based on this transfer window so far. But I'm getting a little bit agitated in that we've become so accustomed to, in recent years, Arsenal identifying targets early, going out, getting them, bringing them in, embedding them in the squad. And I know that this year was different with the international tournament, but it feels like this time there's so many things that are still up in the air going into the new season. And I don't like that. I want us to be ready. I want us to have no distractions. I want us to be prepared. And I know that a lot of what we're doing this summer, whether people want to admit it or not, is clearly dependent on sales, because, we've moved Smith Rowe on. And we've brought Calafiori in, but with Eddie Nketiah not going yet, we haven't really moved on an attacker. I know people will say, well, Nketiah's future doesn't really stop us going out and bringing in an attacker, but it must play some part. Surely it does play some part. To have an extra 25 million quid in the coffers, or at least coming down the line so that you can sort of offset it against a deal for an attacker, would be a big help when PSR is the way that it is. To get money in for Aaron Ramsdale would help in going out and bringing in a goalkeeper that you think is up to speed and up to standard to be your number 2. I'm underwhelmed right now, and not angry. I'm underwhelmed, and I'm a little bit agitated today. And I think that's largely down to the fact that I've been quite clear on my stance on the Nketiah thing, and to scupper that deal for 3-4 million quid, it might prove to be the right decision in the end, but it's one hell of a gamble that Arsenal are taking. Because if Bournemouth don't come up with that kind of money, then where are we with Eddie Nketiah? Stuck. So, yeah. Okay, I think I am going to leave it there, guys. I got to get off to work as well. You can catch me on TalkSport 2 a little bit later on today if you're interested. I'll be joining Flex, and we'll be talking about all the latest transfer stories. I'm sure we'll start looking ahead to the new season as well, which kicks off, of course, at the weekend as far as the Premier League is concerned. Don't forget to leave a like on the video if you haven't done so already. We set that target of 500. We're nowhere near that yet. If you're watching us on X, please do come over to the YouTube channel and subscribe. It really, really does help. And if you're listening on audio, leave us a review. I'll be back very, very soon with more. Until then, take care of yourselves and have a great day up the Arsenal. Goodbye.